The Mont Blanc pen felt cold and heavy in my hand, like holding a loaded gun. I stared down at the document on the mahogany dining table, the crisp white paper blurring slightly under the chandelier light. Across from me, my husband, Caleb, leaned back in his chair, his face twisted into that familiar, arrogant smirk I had once mistaken for confidence. "Sign it, Jordan," he said, his voice dripping with false pity. "Or I promise you, I will make sure this divorce drags on until you're bankrupt and broken. Do you really want to spend the next 3 years fighting me in court?" I didn't look at him. I looked at the signature line. Jordan Banks. The name I had built into a powerhouse in the biotech industry before he ever came along. I picked up the pen. My hand didn't shake. I signed the paper with a flourish, the ink glistening wet and black. "There," I said, sliding the papers across the polished wood. "It's done." Caleb snatched them up, scanning the page to ensure his victory was sealed. "Finally," he scoffed. "You made the right choice, babe. This penthouse was too big for you anyway." I stood up, placed my house keys on the table next to his glass of scotch, and smoothed down my dress. "Goodbye, Caleb." I walked out of my own penthouse, took the private elevator down to the lobby, and stepped out into the biting Chicago wind without looking back. The next morning, his attorney called him. I wasn't there to hear it, but according to the court transcripts that came later, the man was screaming so loud Caleb had to hold the phone away from his ear. "You idiot," the lawyer yelled. "Do you have any idea what you just allowed her to do? You didn't win, Caleb. You just signed your own death warrant." But to understand how I orchestrated the perfect destruction of my husband's life, you have to go back to where the lie began. I met Caleb 7 years ago at a fundraising gala for the Art Institute of Chicago. I was 33, recently named Vice President of Operations at Helix Dynamics, and feeling invincible. Caleb approached me near the Champagne Tower. He was devastatingly handsome, wearing a bespoke tuxedo that fit him like a second skin, talking about his disruptive fintech startup that was going to revolutionize banking. Looking back, the red flags were there, waving violently in my face. The way he seamlessly dropped names of CEOs he barely knew. The vague, jargon-filled answers when I asked about his actual revenue model. The fact that on our third date, he forgot his wallet and laughed it off, letting me pay the $400 dinner bill because equality is sexy. But I was lonely. I had spent my 20s in labs and boardrooms, sacrificing my personal life for my career. Caleb made me feel chosen. He sent flowers to my office. He texted me good morning every single day. He listened to me vent about FDA regulations with intense interest. We married 16 months later. My father had passed away a year before I met Caleb. He left me a substantial inheritance, but more importantly, he left me 3 things that carried his soul. His vintage 1950s Patek Philippe watch, the one he wore every day of his life. His collection of first-edition classic novels, Hemingway, Steinbeck, Fitzgerald, that he had spent 40 years curating. And a handwritten letter tucked inside his favorite copy of The Great Gatsby, telling me that my integrity was the only currency that mattered. I kept the watch in a biometric safe in our master closet. The books were displayed on the custom shelves in the living room. The letter stayed in my bedside drawer. The first year of marriage was a dream. Caleb was attentive, charming, always talking about our power couple future. I didn't mind covering the mortgage and the bills while he pivoted his company. Marriage is a partnership, I told myself. Year 2, his fintech startup imploded. He blamed the regulators, the short-sighted investors, everyone but himself. I paid off his $40,000 credit card debt without a lecture. Year 3, he launched a luxury consulting firm. Then a crypto exchange. Then an AI logistics platform. Each venture required seed capital that I provided. Each one collapsed within 6 months. Meanwhile, I was bringing in nearly $500,000 a year plus bonuses. Caleb was bringing in debt and excuses. By year 5, he had stopped pretending to work entirely. His meetings were golf games. His networking lunches were 3-hour drinking sessions at Gibson's. He bought Italian suits and leased a Porsche on my credit because perception is reality, Jordan. I should have filed for divorce then. But I kept hearing my father's voice about commitment, about sticking through the hard times. I thought I was being a supportive wife. I didn't realize I was being a host to a parasite. Then came the notification. It was a rainy Tuesday in November. Caleb had left his phone on the marble island in the kitchen while he went for a run. The screen lit up. A message from someone saved as Lola appeared, accompanied by a fire emoji. Can't wait for our weekend in Cabo, baby. Make sure you bring that black card. My stomach dropped to the floor. My hands trembled as I unlocked his phone. His passcode was 123,456, fitting for his level of effort in life. I scrolled. 8 months. 8 months of I love you, and she's such a bore, and as soon as I secure my half of the assets, we're gone. Lola wasn't just a random fling. I looked her up. Lexi Monroe. 24 years old. Fitness influencer. 200,000 followers on TikTok. And in her most recent OOTD video, there it was. My father's Patek Philippe watch. She was wearing it loosely on her wrist, waving it at the camera while shilling a protein shake. My father's watch. The one I thought I had misplaced in the move to the new safe. I wanted to scream. I wanted to smash the phone against the wall and burn the penthouse down. I wanted to wait for him to walk through the door and claw his eyes out. But then I looked at my father's books on the shelf. Integrity is the only currency. Rage is cheap. Strategy is expensive. I took screenshots of everything. I forwarded them to an encrypted email account. I wiped the phone down and placed it exactly where he had left it. That night, while Caleb snored beside me, dreaming of Cabo and Lexi, I lay awake and plotted his annihilation. I thought about the prenup he had convinced me to void on our second anniversary because it puts a wall between our hearts. I thought about the 6 years of my life I had poured into a black hole. The next morning, I called Samantha Ross. Sam and I had been roommates at Northwestern. She was now the most terrifying divorce attorney in Chicago. We met at a dive bar where no one would recognize us. I need to destroy him, Sam, I said, sliding the printed screenshots across the sticky table. But I need to do it quietly. Sam reviewed the file, her eyes narrowing. Here's the problem, Jordan. Without the prenup, Illinois is an equitable distribution state. Since you've been commingling funds for years, he can claim the penthouse, your savings, and a chunk of your future earnings. He knows this. That's why he's arrogant. So what do we do? Sam smiled, a shark sensing blood in the water. We play the long game. We let him think he's winning. We let him think he's outsmarting you. And while he's busy counting his chickens, we're going to steal the farm. The plan took 6 months. First, I executed a quiet title transfer on the penthouse. Since I had bought the property originally with inheritance money before the marriage, Sam helped me move it into an irrevocable trust named the JAB Legacy Trust. I told Caleb it was just a tax restructuring to protect us from liability lawsuits in my industry. He signed the consent forms without reading them because he was too busy texting Lexi under the dinner table. Next, I installed hidden cameras. Not the obvious kind. I replaced the smoke detectors and the motion sensors with high-definition pinhole cameras. Illinois requires two-party consent for audio, so I kept them video only. The footage was nauseating. It showed Caleb and Lexi in my home while I was at work. It showed them drinking my rare wine collection. It showed them in my bedroom. And then, the dagger. The camera in the living room captured them standing by the bookshelves. Lexi was complaining that the old books smelled musty. They're depressing, Caleb said, laughing. We should get rid of them. Make space for something modern. I'll sell them off next week. He took 3 of my father's first editions, The Sun Also Rises, East of Eden, and The Great Gatsby, boxed them up, and carried them out the door. When I came home and saw the empty gaps on the shelves, I felt like I had been punched in the gut. I called Caleb. Have you seen the books on the bottom shelf? The ones Dad gave me. Oh, those, he said casually. I donated them to a library drive. They were falling apart, babe. I did you a favor. Donated. He had stolen my father's legacy and given it to a pawn shop or his mistress, and he called it a favor. I locked myself in the master bath, turned on the shower to mask the sound, and sobbed until my throat was raw. Then I washed my face, put on my armor, and called Sam. "Pull the trigger," I said. 3 weeks ago, Caleb made his move. He handed me divorce papers over breakfast. "I want the penthouse," he stated, buttering his toast like he was discussing the weather. "I want half your stock options, and I want $10,000 a month in spousal support until my new venture takes off." I feigned shock. I forced tears. "Caleb, please, we can work this out." "No," he said coldly. "It's over. Give me what I want, or I'll ruin your reputation at Helix." "Fine," I whispered, looking defeated. "But I need to protect the company. My lawyers drafted a separation agreement. It just confirms that we're dividing our personal assets now so the divorce is cleaner. If you sign this waiver acknowledging that you've received satisfactory compensation for the household items, I'll sign over the deed to the penthouse." Caleb's eyes lit up. He thought he had bullied me into submission. Deal. He didn't read the waiver. It was a complex legal document where he explicitly acknowledged that he had removed property of significant value, the stolen items, in lieu of any claim to the real estate or my business interests. Essentially, he agreed that stealing my jewelry and books was his settlement. Which brings us back to the signing. The document I signed at the dining table, the one he thought gave him the penthouse, was a quitclaim deed transferring my personal interest in the property to him. The catch: I didn't own the penthouse anymore. The trust did. I had transferred a title I no longer held. The deed was worthless paper. But the waiver he signed, that was ironclad. The morning after I walked out, Caleb woke up in his new penthouse. He tried to turn on the lights, but the Crestron smart home system didn't respond. I had revoked his admin access remotely at midnight. He tried to brew coffee, but the machine was locked. He tried to leave the building to get Starbucks, but when he walked into the garage, his Tesla Model S, which was registered in my name and paid for by my bonus check, was dead. I had disabled it through the app and reported the plates as compromised. He tried to call an Uber, but his credit cards were linked to my primary account. I had reported them lost and cancelled every single one at 9 a.m. sharp. He tried to call Lexi to come pick him up, but Lexi wasn't answering. Lexi was a little busy. At that exact moment, 2 detectives from the Chicago Police Department were knocking on the door of her Wicker Park apartment. Sam had filed a police report the day before, submitting the video evidence of the theft. They executed a search warrant. They found everything. My father's Patek Philippe watch, the diamond brooch my grandmother wore to her wedding, and the 3 first edition books, sitting on her coffee table, being used as coasters for her iced lattes. Lexi Monroe was arrested for possession of stolen property and conspiracy to commit grand larceny. The police perp walked her out of her building in handcuffs. Someone filmed it, probably a neighbor, and within hours, influencer arrested for robbing boyfriend's wife was trending on Twitter. Brands dropped her before she even made bail. Her career evaporated instantly. Back at the penthouse, Caleb was served with papers by a process server who met him in the lobby. It wasn't a divorce settlement. It was a civil lawsuit for fraud, conversion, theft, and emotional damages. We were suing him for the replacement value of every single item he had stolen over the last 2 years, plus punitive damages for the psychological distress. That was when he called his lawyer. That was when the screaming started. "She played you, Caleb," the lawyer roared. "The waiver you signed releases her from all alimony and property claims because you admitted to taking assets equal to your share. You admitted to the theft in writing. You have no house, no car, no money, and now you're facing a lawsuit you can't afford to fight." Caleb called me 22 times that day. I watched the phone buzz from the balcony of the Four Seasons suite I had booked for the week. I sipped a glass of Pinot Noir, a vintage he would have hated, and let it go to voicemail. The divorce was finalized in record time. Caleb got nothing. Actually, less than nothing. The judge was not amused by a man who stole family heirlooms from his wife to impress an Instagram model. He was ordered to pay restitution, which meant his meager savings were garnished for the next decade. Lexi took a plea deal. She got probation and community service, but her reputation was destroyed. She's currently working as a hostess at a chain restaurant in the suburbs. Caleb moved back in with his parents in Naperville. A 40-year-old entrepreneur sleeping in his childhood twin bed, with no car, no prospects, and a Google search history that labeled him a fraud. Some people told me I was too harsh. They said I should have just left him and moved on, that living well is the best revenge. But those people have never watched a stranger where their dead fathers watch on a TikTok video. They haven't heard the person they vowed to love call their family legacy depressing. I didn't seek revenge. I sought correction. Last week, I moved back into my penthouse. I placed my father's books back on the shelves, right where they belonged. I put the Patek Philippe back in the safe, next to the letter. I sat in the living room, surrounded by the silence of a home that was finally, truly mine. I cried for the wasted years. I cried for the girl who thought love meant paying someone else's debts. And then I dried my eyes. My father was right. Integrity is the only currency. And Caleb Sterling just found out he was broke. If you're watching this, and you feel like you're drowning in a relationship where you're the only one swimming, get out. Document everything. Hire a shark like Sam. And never, ever let them see you bleed. This is Vengeful Goddess signing off. The view from the top is much clearer when you're standing alone.